I'm Layla Young, 27, and I never thought an ordinary Tuesday afternoon could redefine the rhythm of my life. I had been living with Edward Hall, 28, for nearly 2 years, and we'd been together for 3. Our apartment was our shared sanctuary, filled with small routines that had once been intimate: morning coffees, weekend brunches, and the occasional spontaneous getaway. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew us. But that Tuesday, everything changed. Edward sat me down in the living room, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his coffee mug. "Layla," he began carefully, as if measuring each word, "I like you, but I'm not in love with you." Time slowed. My chest tightened. I blinked, hearing the words in fragments. Not in love, yet not breaking up. Still wants transparency. Still wants to stay together. My mind spun with disbelief. "Okay," I said softly, forcing my voice to steady. "Thanks for being honest." That was all I could muster. Inside, a storm raged. The months of late-night talks, shared responsibilities, small gestures of affection, all suddenly seemed one-sided. I remembered the flowers I used to leave on his desk, the dinners I planned for us, the painstaking attention I gave to remembering the little things he loved. And now, he wanted the comfort of companionship, but without the strings that bound two people romantically. I made a decision in that moment, a quiet, deliberate pivot. If he wanted honesty, I would give him exactly that. But honesty for me meant redefining our relationship entirely. The next morning, I stopped leaving him little notes. The coffee I poured was still warm, but the kiss on his cheek was gone. The messages I sent were brief, friendly, neutral. I even canceled the weekly flower delivery I'd been sending him, the $12 a week suddenly feeling absurd in the context of a roommate dynamic. He noticed immediately. The text came first. "Why are you being like this? We need to talk. Please come home so we can work this out." I replied simply, without bitterness. Only clarity. "You asked for honesty. I'm respecting that. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who like each other sharing a space." When I arrived home that evening, Edward was there, waiting. He looked confused. "You're being petty," he said, voice edged with irritation. I shrugged, calm as the room around us. "I'm matching the energy you set. You said you like me, but aren't in love with me. Fine. I like you too, but that's where it ends." His brow furrowed. "But we're still together. We live together. Isn't this complicated?" I let him wrestle with the contradiction. "We live together," I said evenly, "but the romance, the dates, the emotional labor, the planning of a future, that's for someone who's actually in love. You're just a good friend now." The air between us shifted, tense and unfamiliar. I could see the panic beginning to creep into his features, a subtle twitch of the jaw, the way his hands curled slightly at his sides. For years, I had been the one adjusting, giving, and accommodating. Now it was my turn to hold firm. Thursday came with a new level of detachment from my side. I reorganized the apartment. My toiletries moved to the guest bathroom. My work desk claimed a corner of the living room. I set up my own space. Edward arrived home, and his confusion became barely restrained frustration. "Roommates?" he asked cautiously. "Well, yes," I said, deliberately neutral. "You like me, I like you. We share a living space. That's what roommates do." He protested, claiming that couples can exist without passionate love. I simply shook my head, thinking of all the evenings I'd cooked his favorite meals, the gifts he received, the meticulous care I'd given, all gone now, distilled into polite cordiality. "That's friendship with benefits," I told him. "I'm not interested in that arrangement." By Friday evening, he attempted a grand gesture, ordering takeout from the expensive Thai place we only visited on special occasions, complete with appetizers, his favorite sushi, and a bottle of wine. I thanked him, ate my portion, paid my share, and left for the gym, leaving him to stew in a combination of bewilderment and panic. Texts flew at me like arrows, each one sharper than the last. "Why are you doing this? We need to talk. I can't believe you're acting like this." I replied in the same calm, measured tone. "You wanted honesty. I'm giving it. You wanted someone you like, not someone you love. Here I am. No pressure." No. That night, I returned home to find him awake, pacing the living room. His frustration was palpable, and yet I remained composed, taking my place in the guest room. The dynamic of power had shifted, silently, irrevocably. Saturday morning brought breakfast. 2 plates of French toast, his favorite, the kind I had only made for special moments. He looked at me, hopeful. Can we just go back to normal? I smiled quietly, almost gently. This is normal, for roommates who like each other. The tension was suffocating. He accused me of punishing him for honesty. I shook my head. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just honest about what I'm willing to give someone who only likes me. By the time Sunday arrived, the apartment was quieter, the air heavier with unspoken truths. Edward tried to initiate moments of intimacy, movie nights, dinner dates, but I declined, suggested group activities, or kept my distance. The panic was visible in his eyes, the subtle cracking of the confident mask he wore. And I realized, with a mixture of sorrow and clarity, that this was only the beginning. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought I had, was unraveling. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control over my own life, my own boundaries, and my own emotions. I had started Operation Roommate, and Edward had no idea what was coming next. Monday morning arrived, and our apartment felt different, charged with a quiet tension that neither of us could ignore. Edward lingered in the kitchen, pretending to make coffee, yet stealing glances at me as if I had committed some unspeakable crime. I poured my own, keeping my movements deliberate, precise. No kisses, no flirtatious smiles, just the rhythm of 2 people sharing a space. I had fully embraced my role, roommate, not girlfriend. Bills were split evenly now. No more covering his half of dinners or spontaneous weekend getaways. I made a mental note of every expense, every gesture I had previously offered freely. Flowers, coffee runs, surprise treats, all gone. The first time I requested that he Venmo me his portion of a shared expense, he froze, mid-sentence, like he hadn't realized I could quantify my own effort. "You're really doing this?" he asked, voice tight. "I'm just being fair," I said lightly. "This is what roommates do." The panic in his eyes was subtle, almost comical if it weren't so charged with emotional desperation. Texts followed throughout the day. "We need to talk, please. Can we fix this? I don't understand why you're acting this way." I replied calmly in measured sentences. "You were honest about your feelings. I'm honoring that honesty. No pressure, no expectations." By Wednesday, the cracks in our relationship had widened. Edward attempted to initiate intimacy, brushing against me in the living room. Lingering touches that had once felt loving now felt invasive. I gently withdrew, moving to another room without confrontation. He frowned, but said nothing. Thursday brought the first real test. His car needed repairs. Major ones. Thousands of dollars. In the past, I would have immediately offered financial help, covering half or even the full cost. Not now. "Can you help me out?" he asked nervously. "I'll pay you back." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "That's a lot of money. Maybe see if the mechanic will allow a payment plan or ask your family." He stared at me, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "But you always help me with this stuff." I shook my head gently. That was when we were a couple. Roommates don't cover each other's major expenses. The realization hit him like a wave. I watched silently as the mask of entitlement he'd worn for months began to crack. He stormed out that evening, taking an Uber to work, muttering under his breath. The emotional balance of our apartment had shifted completely. I no longer chased affection or approval. I no longer measured my worth by his recognition or gratitude. I existed fully in my own space, with my own rules, my own boundaries. Friday morning, he tried a different tactic: pleading, arguing, cajoling. "I didn't mean it like that," he said. "I do love you. I was just scared." I leaned against the kitchen counter, calm, unshaken. "Then tell me the truth. Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" He hesitated, realizing there was no easy answer. His defensiveness flared. "You're manipulating me." I smiled softly. "I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm documenting our conversations, your honesty, and now my response. You said you liked me, but weren't in love. I'm acting accordingly." Saturday morning arrived, quiet except for the smell of coffee and toasted bread. I watched him move through the apartment, conflicted, frustrated, and slowly coming to terms with the consequences of his own words. His sister called about a family dinner next month, and his panic became evident when he asked if we would attend together. "This is a family dinner," I said lightly. "Couples usually go together. We're roommates who like each other. I think you should just say you can't make it." His face paled. The gravity of what he'd asked for and what he had lost hit him fully. He wanted honesty. He got honesty. No pressure, no romance, no special treatment. Just the truth. By Sunday, the apartment had transformed. The space itself reflected the new dynamic. Organized, quiet, efficient. I had fully claimed my independence. Edward's frantic attempts to rekindle intimacy, control finances, or manipulate emotions only reinforced my clarity. For the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. I was no longer defined by his affection or approval. I was Layla Young, 27, and I was reclaiming the life I had quietly surrendered. The stage was set. Operation Roommate was in full effect, and Edward had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect my heart and assert my boundaries. By Monday, the apartment felt less like a shared home and more like a battlefield disguised as domestic normalcy. Edward was trying every tactic he knew, pleading, anger, charm, yet I remained unmoved. I had become an observer in my own life, documenting every conversation, every text, every expectation he had once assumed I would fulfill automatically. It started with breakfast. 2 plates, his favorite, carefully prepared. I ate silently, deliberately ignoring the longing in his eyes. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. I just want us to be okay." "We are okay," I replied evenly. "We're roommates who like each other. That's what you asked for." He faltered, the words catching in his throat. "But I thought you'd fight. I thought you'd try harder." I set down my fork and looked at him directly. "I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. You told me you weren't in love. I'm responding honestly. There's nothing to fight for if love isn't reciprocated." By midweek, Edward's tactics escalated. He tried love bombing, lavish gestures, sweet notes, texts meant to guilt or seduce. But I remained resolute. I split the bills evenly, handled my chores meticulously, and engaged only in polite, roommate-level conversation. No flirtation, no emotional labor, no compromises for his convenience. Then came the family intervention. Edward had called his parents, hoping they would pressure me into relenting. Within hours, they were in our living room, faces a mixture of concern and confusion. I greeted them politely, calmly explaining the situation. "Layla," his mother asked, eyebrows furrowed, "are you punishing him?" I shook my head, voice steady. "Not at all. I'm just honoring the honesty he asked for. He said he likes me, but he isn't in love. I'm treating him exactly as he requested." His father looked at him, incredulous. "So, you told her you weren't in love with her, and now you're upset that she isn't acting like your girlfriend?" Edward's mouth opened, then closed. There were no words. The contradiction in his expectations was laid bare. His parents processed the situation silently, a tension-filled pause that spoke louder than any lecture I could have delivered. After they left, the apartment felt different. Edward was quieter, more restrained. His previous confidence, the subtle entitlement, the expectation that I would bend for him, it all dissolved under the weight of his own contradictions. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to regain the control he had lost. Thursday brought his social media attempts. He posted vague statements about emotional abuse, manipulation, and financial control. I stayed calm, unfazed. Instead, I gathered all evidence, text messages, documented expenses, notes from our conversations, and prepared to defend myself if necessary. Friday, he attempted direct confrontation. "Layla, this is unfair," he said, voice rising. "You're making me look like a villain." I smiled faintly, serene. "You became a villain by your own choices. I'm just living my truth. No embellishments, no dramatics, just honesty, exactly what you asked for." By the weekend, the reality settled in for Edward. His manipulations, once subtle, were now transparent. His charm, his pleading, his anger, all tactics I had once succumbed to, no longer held power. I had shifted the balance. For the first time, the emotional labor he had expected from me was entirely absent. The apartment, once a shared life, had become my own canvas of independence. I spent the days quietly reclaiming my space, organizing, cleaning, and focusing on myself. Each chore, each decision reinforced my boundaries. Edward's presence became secondary. He could stay or leave. The choice was his. And through it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity, empowerment, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that my love, effort, and energy were precious, and that they were mine to give only to someone who truly reciprocated them. Operation Roommate was working. Edward's unraveling was just beginning. By Monday, it was clear Edward was running out of strategies. His subtle panic had grown into overt desperation. The apartment, once a place of shared life, had become a stage for his unraveling. Texts, calls, and attempts to emotionally corner me came faster, more insistent, and increasingly erratic. He started with love bombing, flowers, this time expensive bouquets, handwritten notes apologizing, and gestures clearly meant to guilt or seduce. He cooked elaborate dinners, attempted to reignite our old routines, and even suggested weekend trips. I observed quietly, sipping my coffee, documenting everything. Each message, each gesture, each plea was recorded, not out of spite, but as a shield and a mirror reflecting the truth. I responded only when necessary, with calm politeness, a gentle, measured tone, showing none of the panic or need he had for me to act emotionally. "Layla, please," he said one evening, after leaving a candlelit dinner untouched on the counter. I'm trying here. Don't you see that?" "I do see that," I replied evenly, "but I also see that you're asking for love and intimacy without giving it yourself. I'm honoring your honesty. You asked for someone you like, not someone you love. That's what I am." By mid-week, Edward's social tactics grew bolder. He posted vague stories online, suggesting manipulation, control, and emotional abuse on my part. The intended effect was panic, shame, or confusion. But I remained composed. I began sharing the documented evidence selectively with close friends, showing every text, every message where he admitted he wasn't in love but still expected all the benefits of a relationship. Friends began to see the pattern. His carefully constructed narrative crumbled under scrutiny. One mutual friend, Derek, commented privately, "So she friend-zoned you, but you still wanted the boyfriend perks? That's unreal." His frustration only mounted. He tried bargaining, therapy, couples counseling, starting over, but I remained firm. "I don't need therapy to know I deserve someone who's actually in love with me," I said. Then came the public confrontation. Edward had escalated to telling our mutual friends and family his version of events, painting me as cold and controlling. But with the documentation I had, the truth became clear. He had asked for honesty, he had admitted lack of romantic feeling, and he had wanted all the benefits of a committed relationship without the emotional cost. By Friday, the breaking point came. Edward, exhausted, frustrated, and socially cornered, realized his manipulations no longer worked. He began packing quietly, moving his belongings into boxes with a resigned efficiency. There was no dramatic confrontation, no plea, no theatrics. He left the apartment with the quiet realization that his attempts to control, manipulate, or guilt me had failed. As I watched him load the last boxes into his car, a mix of relief and empowerment washed over me. I wasn't sad, I was liberated. The energy I had spent chasing someone who wasn't invested in me was now mine to reclaim. The apartment felt lighter, my routines more deliberate. Coffee tasted better, rooms felt open, and mine alone. Operation Roommate had succeeded. Edward's extinction burst, all the frantic gestures and desperate pleas, had only revealed the true dynamic of our relationship: one-sided expectation versus honest, self-respecting response. And as I stood there, watching him leave, I realized this was more than a relationship ending. It was a reclaiming of my emotional autonomy. The man I thought I loved was gone, not in anger, but in clarity. And for the first time in years, I felt fully, unmistakably free. The apartment was quiet in a way it hadn't been for years. Edward's car had disappeared down the street, the sound of the engine fading like the final note of a symphony. Boxes were gone. His presence, once constant, now left only empty space, and with it, a clarity I hadn't realized I was missing. I walked through the rooms, each corner now entirely my own. The living room, once cluttered with shared memories, now felt open, light, and mine to shape. I brewed a cup of coffee and let the aroma fill the space. For the first time, it wasn't a ritual shared with someone else. It was mine, deliberate, unhurried. Looking back, the weeks had been a masterclass in emotional clarity. Edward's attempts to manipulate, guilt, or charm me had only confirmed what I already knew. I deserved someone who truly loved me, not someone who wanted all the privileges without the investment. His parents had quietly processed the situation as well. The intervention he had tried to stage backfired, leaving him isolated in the truth he had long denied. Even our mutual friends, once unsure of the dynamics, now understood. His narrative had crumbled under the weight of honesty and evidence. I spent the next few days reorganizing, not out of spite, but as a personal declaration. My things, my space, my routines, everything reflected a life reclaimed. I repainted a corner of the living room, swapped out the cheap coffee he preferred for the rich beans I loved, and even started the woodworking class I'd postponed years ago because it was a waste of money. Now, the only waste would be my own time spent catering to someone else's unreciprocated affection. The liberation wasn't just practical, it was emotional. The anxiety I had carried for years, the second-guessing, the subtle self-doubt, gone. I could think clearly, make decisions freely, and invest my energy into myself, not into someone who had chosen comfort over love. A week later, I found a small note tucked into the box of belongings Edward had left behind. It was brief, almost apologetic, though lacking any real acknowledgement of the truth. I smiled and tucked it into my journal, a memento of the man who had taught me a valuable lesson without ever intending to. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I reflected on what had happened, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for my own resilience. I had endured emotional manipulation, financial pressure, and the subtle erosion of self-worth, and I had emerged intact, stronger, and more self-aware than ever. For the first time, I realized that peace isn't found in another person's love or approval. It's found in claiming your own boundaries, insisting on respect, and refusing to settle for anything less than mutual devotion. Edward was gone. The apartment was mine. And Layla Young, 27, was free. Free to live fully, love authentically, and never again allow anyone to dictate her worth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't drama or confrontation. It's living with clarity, grace, and unapologetic autonomy. And that's exactly what I intended to do.